Welcome back, everyone. So, for today's deep dive, we're going to be looking at something a little bit different. We're going to be exploring Diana Cage's book, Box Lunch. It's subtitled The Layperson's Guide to Cunnilingus.
That's right, yeah.
So, a little bit of a departure from some of our usual sources, but we think there's a lot to unpack here, a lot of really valuable insights.
Yeah, I think so too. This source, when it came across our desk, it really seemed like an opportunity to explore a topic that, let's be honest, doesn't always get talked about in the most helpful or insightful ways.
Right, right.
It's often either, kind of sensationalized or shrouded in awkwardness. And I think what we really wanted to do with this deep dive is extract, what's truly useful, what's experience-backed from Cage's perspective.
Yeah, I think especially, coming from the perspective of someone who she describes herself as, a lesbian sex worker.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, this is about understanding not just the how-to, but like the why
The why.
and the broader context.
And what's so valuable, I think, about Cage's perspective is that she really writes from this place of someone who genuinely enjoys both giving and receiving oral sex with women.
Right.
It's not coming from, like, a purely theoretical or a clinical perspective.
Yeah.
She's really grounded in her own personal experience. And, she mentions throughout the book, her years of conversations and feedback from numerous partners.
Right. And I think that really does come through in the book.
Yeah, and I think what's refreshing, too, is that she doesn't just kind of, like, list techniques and positions,
Right.
It's really about, like, she wants to ignite joy in the bedroom, like, expand your understanding. And she says, in her words, she wants to help you become a more skilled, uninhibited, adventurous, and confident lover.
I love that. That's a great aim to have. And it's about really enhancing intimacy and mutual satisfaction.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think her background is important to acknowledge too. I mean, as the editor of On Our Backs, she's been years like immersed in these conversations and these discussions about, female pleasure, navigating all kinds of questions and experiences. So there's a real like authority and a groundedness to her advice.
Yeah, I think you can really tell that she's been thinking about this stuff and dealing with real questions about it for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's also interesting is that she doesn't shy away from like addressing any of those initial hesitations that you might have about this topic, right?
Right.
Like she acknowledges like the cultural discomfort, the taboos surrounding, the vagina, those anxieties around smell and taste and performance. I think she tackles those issues very openly.
Yeah, I think that's what makes the book so approachable too. Like,
Yeah.
She really sets this tone of honesty and, freedom from shame, which I think is so important for any conversation about sexuality.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's jump into some of the core ideas here. And one of the things that struck me right away is Cage's, genuine enthusiasm for cunnilingus. She states very clearly, like, this is something she loves giving and receiving. She considers it, fundamental part of her sexual life.
Yeah.
And she even goes so far as to suggest that, for many women, it's the most direct and reliable route to orgasm.
Yeah, I think that's such a key point, and it's something that she emphasizes throughout the book.
Yeah.
And I think what's important too is her focus on the potential for like really strong and really focused orgasms through cunnilingus. She actually shares, an anecdote of her first time and how it was like this incredibly pleasurable experience.
Oh, wow.
Where she's like, I don't even know how to describe it. It was like all of these amazing sensations all at once. So I think that really kind of like sets the tone for the book, Like
Right.
this isn't just some like perfunctory act.
Yeah, they can be really profound.
It can be really profound. It can be incredibly enjoyable. But she's also really down to earth about like the learning process.
Yeah.
She talks about her own early inexperience, and that feeling of being overwhelmed by wanting to please her partner. She definitely experienced that learning curve
Right.
where it's like, okay, well, I don't really know what I'm doing and I'm kind of feeling my way through this.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then she contrasts that with a later, more positive experience with a partner who was really good at offering her guidance and making her feel, more secure in what she was doing.
That's so interesting.
And I think that's a really valuable point. Like it normalizes that, these skills, like any skill, they develop over time.
Yeah,
And it's through experience, it's through communication, it's through feedback
absolutely.
that we kind of learn and grow.
So let's talk about some of those common worries, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think one of the things that people often kind of get hung up on are the anxieties around, you know, smell and taste.
Yeah, for sure.
And Cage really confronts this head on. She's very reassuring. She's like, a healthy vagina, she describes it as this kind of musky, heady, and sexy scent.
Hmm.
And like a slightly tart or tangy taste.
Right.
Like she's very definitive about this.
Yeah. And I think what's important too is that she really cautions against douching.
Yes.
She explains that douching really disrupts the natural, healthy balance of bacteria in the vagina, and it can actually lead to more odor issues.
Right. That's such an important point.
It's kind of counterintuitive. You think if you're worried about smell, you want to like really wash it and get in there.
Right. Right.
But actually, the best approach is to really kind of just let the body do its thing.
Trust the body.
Trust the body. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's so much wisdom in that. And she even shares this anecdote, and it's so funny, about she calls him the Big Mac boy,
Oh, yeah.
a former boyfriend who, shall we say, wasn't very skilled at oral sex.
Right.
And it's just this really, like, funny illustration that technique matters.
Yeah.
And, she's very blunt about it. She's like, girls gossip, so put in a little effort.
Yeah. Pay attention to the details.
Yeah, it makes a difference.
Absolutely. And I think, this kind of leads into one of her, I think, most foundational messages, which is that cunnilingus is a mutual act.
Okay.
It's not just one person doing something to another. And I think, she really challenges this idea that it's something that's performed like out of obligation. She emphasizes that, a lot of people, including herself, genuinely derive pleasure from giving oral sex.
That's great. That's a great perspective to have.
Yeah, and it's about that mutual enjoyment.
Yeah.
And I think confidence is so important, like confidence in giving, confidence in feeling comfortable receiving.
Right. And to build that confidence, she provides, I think, a really valuable section where she does what she playfully calls this kind of guided tour of the pleasure palace.
Yes, I love that.
Right. Which is basically like outlining the key parts of the vulva.
Yeah, and I think this is where things get really interesting because she describes the labia majora and minora, the outer lips and inner lips, but then she really focuses on the clitoris.
Yes, the clitoris.
Which, she really emphasizes that it's unique as the only organ that is solely dedicated to pleasure.
Wow, yeah.
And it contains around 8,000 nerve endings.
Why? Okay.
Which is that's just this incredible density. And it really underscores why, gentle, varied stimulation around the clitoris is often far more effective than direct aggressive approaches.
Interesting. Okay.
And she kind of breaks down the clitoris into its component parts, the glands, which is the visible part, the hood, which covers the glands, the shaft, which extends back, and then kind of internally the crura and the bulbs.
Wow, I never knew there were so many parts.
Yeah, it's quite complex. And what's interesting is that she emphasizes that, stimulating this entire area either directly or indirectly is really central to most women's orgasms. And, the hood in particular is very sensitive and often prefers more gentle teasing before you move to more direct stimulation of the glands.
That's great advice, yeah.
Yeah.
So she doesn't stop at the clitoris, right?
Oh, no, she keeps going.
So tell us about, what are some of the other areas and anatomical kind of highlights that she delves into?
Yeah, so she talks about the urethral opening and then the G-spot.
Okay.
Which she describes as, this kind of slightly textured, spongy tissue located on the front wall of the vagina.
Right.
And she mentions that, with fem pressure, this can lead to female ejaculation.
Oh, wow.
And then, she moves on to the vaginal opening itself.
Right.
And this concept of tenting during arousal.
Okay, what is tenting?
Yeah, so tenting refers to the expansion of the inner 2/3 of the vagina. So it kind of widens and lengthens.
Okay.
Which, makes it more receptive and more sensitive to stimulation.
Wow, okay. And so she's really kind of providing this map of the landscape of pleasure.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think, this anatomical awareness isn't just about knowing the names of things.
Yeah.
It's about, it empowers you to be more deliberate, more effective in your approach.
Yeah, yeah.
Understanding where these pleasure centers are and how they might respond to different kinds of touch.
Right.
I think that's just fundamental to enhancing pleasure.
Absolutely. Now, she's also a big advocate for self-loving, which is her term for masturbation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And she considers it essential for, developing that personal understanding of your own body, your own preferences.
I think that's such a crucial point.
Yeah.
Like, how can you effectively communicate your desires to a partner if you don't have a clear understanding of, like, what your own erogenous zones are, what brings you pleasure? So I think that self-knowledge really directly informs your ability to guide a partner,
Right.
and to have more fulfilling sexual experiences.
Absolutely. And this leads directly to, the importance of open communication with partners.
Yes, communication is key.
She really encourages, using what she calls, dirty talk
Mm-hmm.
and providing specific positive feedback and direction during sex.
Yeah, she emphasizes, like, being really clear about what you like, what you don't like,
Right.
what feels good.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's such a crucial part of creating a really, like, pleasurable and connected experience.
Now, she even provides some advice on setting the mood before any kind of physical contact even happens.
Oh, yeah.
Right. It's not just about, like, the mechanics. It's about building desire, anticipation.
For sure, yeah.
And she suggests things like talking dirty, flirting, both in person and through messages, leaving, suggestive notes.
Right.
And, of course, kissing and breast play.
Yeah, I think her emphasis on breast play is really interesting.
Okay.
She describes breasts as these, like, sensitive little bundles of love.
I love that.
And she points out that, for a lot of women, there's a really direct connection between nipple stimulation and the clitoris.
Oh, interesting.
And, some people can even achieve orgasm solely through nipple play.
Wow.
So it's not something to underestimate.
Definitely not. Okay, so the mood is set, desire is present.
Yes.
Now let's talk about, like, the actual techniques.
Okay, getting down to business.
So what does Kate suggest? What are some of her key points?
Yeah, so she really emphasizes starting slowly and gradually increasing the intensity. And she has a very clear caution against, like, immediately focusing on the clitoris. It's about, like, taking your time. It's about building up the pleasure.
Right, being patient.
Patience is key, yeah. And she also stresses the importance of maintaining lubrication with saliva.
Okay.
Seems like a simple detail, but it's really essential for comfort.
Makes sense.
And then she kind of goes into, like, the variety of tongue movements.
Okay.
And the amount of pressure you can use. But her real emphasis is on, like, paying close attention to the woman's reactions and cues. What's she doing with her body? Is she, grinding her hips? Is she kind of bucking?
Right, or pulling away if something's too intense.
Exactly, yeah. Or if she's tensing up. These are all, like, really important signals to be reading.
Right, and responding to.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then she also talks about rhythm.
Yeah, rhythm is crucial.
Like finding a rhythm and maintaining that.
Yeah. And she suggests that can be incredibly effective in helping a woman reach orgasm.
Okay. So what happens if, your tongue starts to get a little fatigued?
Yeah.
She offers some solutions for that, right?
Yeah, she has some really practical tips.
Okay.
She suggests incorporating your lips, your head, jaw, neck, even, your whole body movements.
Oh, wow.
To kind of, like, maintain the momentum, but also give your tongue a little bit of a break.
So it's about being adaptable,
Exactly.
Okay. What about, that moment when she's getting close to orgasm?
Oh, so Cage's advice is really straightforward. Don't stop.
Okay.
Keep going. But she also gives a whole range of, like, tips to take her over the edge.
Okay. I like this.
When she's close but not quite there.
Okay. So what are some of those tips?
Yeah, so she suggests all sorts of things, like, changing the pattern of your tongue movements, stimulating other erogenous zones like, the nipples, the anus, gently inserting fingers into the vagina or the anus, even briefly moving away from, like, direct clitoral stimulation if it seems like it's too much.
Interesting.
Using a vibrator in conjunction with oral sex, moaning, to kind of, like, build the atmosphere.
I like that, yeah.
Applying gentle pressure just above the pubic bone, even using your tongue and fingers simultaneously. So it's really about, like, layering the sensations.
That's great advice. Now, shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about positions.
Okay, yeah.
So she describes several classic positions for cunnilingus, starting with the familiar, like on her back.
Right.
Which, offers pretty easy access.
Yeah, classic for a reason.
Classic for a reason. What about 69?
Oh, 69. Yeah, so that's for simultaneous oral stimulation.
Yeah, everyone gets some attention there.
Everyone gets in on the action.
Okay. What about seated?
Yeah, so the seated position, she kind of talks about how in that position the woman might feel more serviced,
Interesting.
like she's really being like taken care of, and she
Sure.
can kind of like relax and watch the action.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, what about sit on my face?
Oh, sit on my face.
That's a
The
classic.
classic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in this position, she really has like complete control
Yeah, that's right.
of the pace and the pressure. It's also like, lots of skin to skin contact.
Right.
It can be really like intense and intimate.
Yeah. Are there any other positions that she talks about?
Yeah, she mentions like the sideways position, which allows for like greater mobility, um, doggy style, which
Yeah.
obviously offers a different angle.
Right, right.
And potential access to the anus. And then she also makes this general point that, most sexual positions can be adapted to include oral pleasure.
I like that.
It's really about getting creative.
Yeah. Now, I love this section where she provides this playful, and it's really extensive, list of 66 great places to eat pussy.
Yes, that's a fun one.
All right. And it ranges from, the expected to the delightfully unexpected.
Yeah, it really kind of gets the imagination going.
Yeah. Now, she also delves into incorporating sex toys
Mhm.
and other forms of penetration alongside cunnilingus.
Right, yeah.
So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so she talks about, the potential for enhanced pleasure by using fingers.
Okay.
But she emphasizes like the importance of, trim nails and lubricant.
Of course. Yeah.
She talks about anal stimulation with fingers or toys, and then she goes into like a variety of sex toys that are out there.
Right, right. So like vibrators and dildos.
Yeah, vibrators, dildos. She mentions those specifically designed for G-spot stimulation.
Okay.
Butt plugs. It's really about like having an open dialogue, about your desires.
Right.
And being willing to experiment with different sensations and different tools. She even touches on female ejaculation and suggests that, focusing on G-spot stimulation while kind of bearing down during orgasm might increase the likelihood for some people. So yeah, it's really about finding what combination of sensations is going to work for each individual.
Right. Now, she doesn't shy away from the topic of anal pleasure.
No, not at all.
So talk to us about rimming.
Yeah, so rimming or cunnilingus is another potential avenue for intimacy and sensation. And again, she really emphasizes like the importance of cleanliness.
Of course.
And like a gradual, gentle approach.
Right.
And she gives some practical suggestions for positions,
Yeah.
when rimming, like doggy style, lying on the stomach. But again, she reiterates the need to really pay attention to your partner's reactions.
Right, right.
And to start very, very gently. And she even mentions, using barriers like dental dams or plastic wrap
Yeah.
for safer anal play. So it's really about, expanding the possibilities for pleasure,
Yeah.
but also prioritizing like comfort and safety.
Absolutely. So speaking of safety, she includes, a section on safer sex practices.
Yeah.
And acknowledges that, oral sex, even between women, does carry some risks of STI transmission.
Right.
And she talks about, the use of dental dams and plastic wrap as protective barriers.
Yeah. And I think what's really helpful is that she gives like really practical advice on using these barriers effectively. She
Okay.
suggests like using flavored dental dams, larger dental dams,
Okay.
which can be more comfortable. Like
Yeah.
she specifically mentions Glide Dams, which is a brand. She even suggests like marking the licking side of a dam so you know which side is which.
Right.
And even using like a garter belt to help hold it in place.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so it's really about like she reframes safer sex. It's not a buzzkill.
Right.
It's about like this responsible, caring aspect of intimacy.
I love that framing. Finally, she explores incorporating elements of like power dynamics and different sensations into cunnilingus. And she kind of touches on BDSM, right?
Yeah, this is where she kind of delves into like those kinkier aspects
Yeah.
she alluded to earlier. And she gives examples like, gently forcing someone down, holding them in place, using soft restraints, incorporating, verbal commands.
Okay.
But her real emphasis here is on like clear communication,
Right.
enthusiastic consent,
Of course.
and established safety protocols.
Yeah.
Like that is absolutely essential for any kind of BDSM play.
Absolutely.
And then she also talks about, adding in all sorts of like other sensations, from the refreshing tingle of mints to playful pinching, light slapping. even using like a clit pump to kind of enhance blood flow and sensitivity. So it's really about like exploring that spectrum of what feels pleasurable, even
Right.
those things that might initially seem a little outside the box.
So it seems like ultimately, Cage is presenting cunnilingus as this really rich, diverse landscape of possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's about mutual enjoyment, open communication, and that willingness to explore and see what brings the most pleasure and deepens the connection.
I think that's a perfect summary. It's
Yeah.
about like bringing that sense of playfulness and curiosity to your sexual experiences.
Absolutely. So as we kind of conclude this deep dive into Diana Cage's, insights on oral pleasure, it seems like that central message is that this is a multifaceted act with endless potential for intimacy, exploration, and most importantly, shared joy.
Precisely. It really all comes back to fostering, open communication, respecting boundaries and consent, and maintaining that playful and curious attitude towards discovering what truly ignites pleasure for both you and your partners.
Now that you've explored this detailed guide to the art of oral pleasure with us, consider this. How might a deeper understanding of your own desires and the ability to communicate them more openly enhance not only your experiences of receiving pleasure, but also your capacity to give it in ways that are truly meaningful and exciting for your partners?
That's something to really think about. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.